Welcome back to the Blurred Line Show. This is Black Line and Blue Line. If you have not listened to our first episode and it's your first time listening, I am a young black male from Memphis, Tennessee, and my co-host is a white 42-year-old, 10-year cop. So the conversation that we are having needs to be had more because I'm black, he's white. I'm out here getting money and he a cop. Not just playing. But no, we're just two different people and we're just having conversations.
Real quick before you get going,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to thank everybody. We had a lot of good feedback
We did.
last time.
I
From the
love
first
y'all.
episode,
Shout out to y'all.
and I'm glad everybody listened. I'm glad everybody liked it.
Mm-hmm.
On the front end, I want to just plug our sponsor because they're badass.
Oh, and the t-shirts. Tell them about the t-shirts.
Yeah, we got T-shirts. We already episode 2 of Blurred
Yes.
Lines, and we already got T-shirts.
We already got t-shirts. We
and
working,
that
baby.
is compliments of Blackluster Clothing Company, and they're badass. You got to check them out.
He has
They're
a lot
on
of dope things on his website.
They're on Facebook at Blackluster Clothing Company, and Blackluster's one word, BLACKLUSTRE.
Check them out.
And the website is also blacklusteroneword.com. So
Yep.
check them out. Check
Check
out our
'em
shirts.
out.
Check out all the other stuff. It's badass.
Support.
Black business. And their catchphrase
yes.
again, the tagline, which is badass, and I should
And
memorize
some
it.
about, and some of the stuff goes to charity, right, or something like that.
Yeah, he's doing a bunch of good shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Good dude. Good guy.
what we're talking about today is going to be Philando Castile mostly.
Yes, sir.
And a lot of his work is to benefit other people who were who were tragically, we'll say, killed by police. Turned out it was lawful according to the courts.
Oh, cool.
But
You just said a
not
lot
so
right
much.
there. All right.
So Blackluster is a black-owned clothing company that makes apparel, not apologies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're doing is we're not making apologies for existing and being black.
And so, Blue, if it's okay with you, I gotta get something off my chest real fast.
Absolutely, man.
White people need to be very excited that black people just want equality and justice, and not revenge for all the cruel things that they have done to society. White people need to call out white supremacy. They need to call out a lot of things that go on. And the reason why I say that is because we're getting tired of this mental illness game. And let me say this, RP to the Nashville victims who were shot at the Waffle House. And shout out to James Shaw who disarmed the man. But every time a mass shooting or anything that white people do, it gets played off with the mental illness. When black people do something, whether it was Michael Brown, whether it was Oscar Grant, Eric Gardner, there are so many ways that white people say, well, he shouldn't have done this, or he shouldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm.
He shouldn't have ran. This last shooting that happened in Sacramento, he shouldn't have ran. But yet, when a white person does a mass shooting at a school or a restaurant, wherever it's at, a church, the police take the proper approach in arresting that man.
Mm-hmm.
And white people need to check that, and white people need to be very excited and praising their white Jesus that black people don't want revenge, and we just want equality and justice. That's all I got to say.
Black, you said a lot of shit, man. So there's a lot of stuff we could comment on that.
Yes.
There's 1,000 issues. To say that one's bigger than another is silly.
Mm-hmm.
You're absolutely right. When black people do something, it's their fault.
Mm-hmm.
It is 100% their fault. There are no excuses made. Nobody gives a shit that they had a rough life. Nobody gives a shit that their mom just died. Nobody gives a shit that they may or may not have mental illness. Nobody cares. It's never brought up. It's just they did this. And of course they did, because look at the color of their skin. White people are routinely given excuses. The other very telling thing is that people are super reluctant to call white people terrorists.
Mm-hmm.
Off the top of my head, the only white atrocity where the general public acknowledges the person was a terrorist is Timothy McVeigh in the Oklahoma City bombing.
Mm-hmm.
That is the only one where en masse people correctly identify it as domestic terrorism. Dylan Roof, the dude who shot up the black church in South Carolina, that dude is a terrorist.
Yes.
But nobody will call him a terrorist,
Call him that.
and it's because he's white. The definition of terrorism are acts of violence in furtherance of a political or religious agenda.
Mhm.
He attacked that church because he's a racist.
Okay.
All of the KKK are Christian, mind you. They derive from their religion,
Oh,
their
yeah.
beliefs that whites are superior. It comes from their belief.
Yes.
Okay. So Dylan Roof, similarly, was a white Christian and a white racist, and he didn't like black people. And in furtherance of his religious agenda, he went in and killed 8 people, and nobody will call him a terrorist. He is a terrorist.
And nobody will, when, like you brought up the KKK, white people don't call that out. But let somebody go rob a store and scream Black Lives Matter,
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna group the whole Black Lives Matter as a hate group.
Mm-hmm.
People haven't even done their research on the Black Panthers, but they have compared the Black Panthers to the KKK. The Black Panthers were nowhere what the KKK does. The Black Panthers did not go out and lynch white people.
Mhm.
They did not go out and kill white people. Simply what the Black Panthers did was say we were going to protect our communities from white people,
Mm-hmm.
and they got called a hate group.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, white
Yeah.
people have yet to call out their people for the bullshit that goes on in society.
Yep.
So let's talk about Philando Castile for a minute.
Not a minute. We're gonna talk a little bit. This is gonna take a little bit.
Yeah, it's gonna take a little bit.
Because we're gonna break this shit down.
Blue gonna break this shit down for y'all. I'm telling y'all.
All
Okay.
right.
So if you're not aware of who Philando Castile was, he was a young man shot actually 10 days after his birthday.
Mm-hmm.
That was more fucked up. By a cop. He was stopped because of a broken tail light. The cop told him to reach for or get his license and registration. Philando Castile proceeded to tell him, "I have a firearm on me," and the cop obviously got scared and just started letting off fire shots. Just a little bit about Philando. He was 32. He was an assistant at a church. At a school, and he had his 4-year-old. She was 4, right?
Yeah, 4. Yep.
She was a 4-year-old child. She was in the back of the car, and he had his girlfriend. Now, that video, I went back and watched the video just for this show, and I didn't cry because of the shooting. That did not, because I've just seen black people get shot by cops multiple times on TV. What hurt me was when his girlfriend still had the awareness to say, "Yes, sir. No, sir." The cop is yelling at her, saying, "Put your hands on the steering wheel." But she was still, and just once again, I want to shout out to black women because y'all just so strong. Without y'all, none of us would be here. That's a scientific fact. So just for y'all just so strong. But for her to have the awareness and just stay strong, stay calm in that situation, her little baby, you in the video, you can see the baby running out the back of the car, and the cops grab her, which is very, very hurtful. So, Blue, could you please explain how that shooting went down? Because you're a cop, I'm pretty sure you've had certain situations like that.
Mm-hmm.
And can you explain of why that cop did not get incarcerated?
I would love to. All right. Let me preface what I'm going to say. I'm about to say what is going to be seemingly negative things about police. I don't view it as negative. I just view it as true. And it is negative, but it's also the truth. I'm not picking on police. I'm just fucking calling it like it is. And that's what needs to happen. The reason I want to preface what I'm about to say is because none of what I'm about to say is reflective of any of the departments I've ever worked for. I do not have a beef with either of the 2 departments I've worked for. The 2 departments I've worked for, I worked for them specifically because of the departments that they are. They're well run, they're well supervised, they're fair, they're honest, they're decent, they're accredited, they're good departments. And this is not a critique of them or anybody I've ever worked with. I've never actually, the shit you see on TV and what goes on, I've never seen that firsthand in my policing experience.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason for that is because I work for good departments, okay?
Okay.
There are better agencies and less good agencies, and I've worked for 2 very fantastic agencies, all right? So this is not a critique of them or anybody I've ever worked with. This is a critique of policing culture in general, society in general, and problems within policing culture
Mm-hmm.
and problems within society. Even though I've worked for good departments, there are inherent problems that people need to start addressing and speak up about.
Okay.
All right. That's the most positive thing I'm going to say. It's going to get super fucking negative because it's the truth. Okay. What people need to understand about police use of force is where the standard comes from. Case law is what governs police use of force. Now, case law is a generic term. Case law refers to it's basically a precedent. All right. So anytime a particular case is heard, whether it's policing related or not, if the courts deem that this particular case is generally a good way to rule given the circumstances of the case, then going forward, when similar instances arise, they default to the existing case law. Mm-hmm. So it's a precedent. The prevailing case law with police use of force is Graham versus Connor. All right. So real briefly, what happened in Graham versus Connor was, and I forget who's the cop and who's the suspect, and I use that term loosely because he didn't do anything wrong. I think Graham was the suspect and Connor was the cop, but I forget. What happened in Graham versus Connor is Graham was diabetic and he was having low blood sugar and he needed to get something in his system to fix this issue. So a buddy of his drove him to a convenience store so he could get some orange juice to fix his diabetic issue. Mm-hmm. Graham gets out of the car, runs in the store, realizes the line is too long and he doesn't have time to wait, so he immediately runs back out, jumps in his buddy's car, they drive away. Police officer sees this. Robberies go down just like that, all right? Stores get robbed, there's usually somebody waiting, getaway driver, and it goes down real quick. It's in and out. So the cop's like, wonder if that store just got robbed.
Yes.
So he goes and pulls over the car. Whatever conversation is had, I don't know specifically what's discussed, but I can imagine generally the cop said, hey, I pulled you over because I saw what I thought was suspicious. I got to make sure you guys didn't just rob this place. Graham says, hey, I'm diabetic. Here's what happened. I need to actually go. He's probably very concerned with his medical issue. So he's probably impatient and wants to get out of there. Cop picks up on this. The cop probably reads that as suspicion. I don't know. Bottom line is he puts him in handcuffs so that he can detain him while he investigates what did or didn't happen at the store. Long story short, dude didn't do anything wrong. He's diabetic. Cop figures this out, finally believes him, takes him out of handcuffs, sends him on his way. Graham turns around and sues the department for excessive force because he didn't do anything. So that's what happened in Graham versus Connor. The case law that came from this is generally use of force has to be viewed from a reasonable standard, what a reasonable officer would do with the facts known at the time. You cannot judge police use of force from hindsight because obviously hindsight's 20/20. You have to view police use of force from the facts at hand at the time that it's applied and what a reasonable officer would generally do. Okay. 3 key points in that are, what is the crime that's being investigated? Are you investigating a shoplift, potentially, or are you investigating a violent felony? The seriousness of the crime needs to be considered. Also, what needs to be considered is the suspect actively resisting? Is there immediate danger to society or the officer? Those are all things that need to be considered in Graham versus Connor and use of force and whether or not it's properly applied. So that's generally the case law behind use of force. Fast forward to Philando Castile. Okay, I'm going to say a bunch of shit here.
Here we go.
Jump in, Black. Anytime you want to chime in or got questions.
Hey, I'm all ears, Blue.
All right. Go. I want to start with cops and cop culture.
First, okay, let me do.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so the difference between cop culture, well, I ain't gonna say cop culture, I would say white culture, I guess, because I just said that white people don't call out bullshit that they do as a society. Black people, we are familiar with gang culture. We're familiar with just, kicking it with the homies. Your homie, or your homie, like, that's in the gang, and they do some fucked up shit, that OG or that big homie, they're gonna check that guy who did some fucked up shit. If you a lot of times when you're gang banging and you're selling drugs, don't kill nobody because we don't want to bring the heat on us. So when things like that used to happen, they would get onto that person who did some fucked up shit. So I do think that's the difference between the black culture and the white culture. If I'm wrong,
no, I think you're right.
Please tell me. But
white people don't hold each other accountable. Yeah, but even worse than that,
that's the only thing.
But you know why? Because of their privilege. They don't think there's anything to be held accountable for. We're fucking blind to who we are. We're perfect.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we think that? Society's set up in our
And when
benefit.
you call it out, man, you look like the freaking devil.
Yeah.
You know.
So facts are important, man. It's not bad to talk about
Yeah.
facts. That's what we're gonna do.
Yeah, man. So,
All right.
yeah,
So
jump in.
cops and cop culture, they do not call each other out. There's this big thing in policing where everybody likes to not Monday morning quarterback somebody. They always like to say, "Well, you weren't there." I can't speak to that because I wasn't there. That's that officer. He was there or she was there. I can't speak to that because I wasn't there.
Yeah.
Well, fuck you, because guess what? We have video footage of what happened to Philando Castile. So we were all technically there.
Yep.
And more so than anybody else, I was there because I've been in that officer's shoes hundreds of times. I've been a cop for 10 years, and I've pulled over people who I suspected of being a suspect in a violent crime hundreds of times. Hundreds. Okay, couple fucking things about Philando Castile shooting. Every single time a police officer pulls somebody over, it is reasonable to assume that that person is going to start digging around their car. Because what happens when you fucking pull people over? You ask for their license, registration, and insurance.
Correct.
Officer Yanez asked Philando for his license and registration and insurance. He asked him for it. If you ask somebody for those items, go ahead and expect that they're going to dig around looking for them.
Correct.
Okay, that's number one.
Yes.
Policing's all about reasonableness. Okay? He pulls over Philando. So to back up a little bit. The officer believed that Philando Castile resembled a suspect in a recent robbery.
In a recent robbery, yeah.
The information he gave, or the reasons he gave as to why he suspected this may be the same person, is because the guy had a wide set nose. That's fucking bullshit. Okay? Do you know how many people have a wide... If all you've got is wide set nose, that sucks. That sucks. That would be like a white person committing a crime and the police suspecting me because I have pale skin, and white people in general are pale. That's bullshit.
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, dig a touch deeper, okay?
Yeah.
So he supposedly believes that this person may be a suspect in a violent felony.
Mm-hmm.
Pulls the dude over for a broken tail light, goes up to the car, asks the dude for his license and registration. It's reasonable to assume that whether it's asked for or not, people know what to expect when they're pulled over. They know they have to provide that stuff. All right. So he walks up, asks for these items.
Mm-hmm.
Another little fun side note about policing is when the police get shot, the person who shoots them doesn't show their hand. They don't ever say, "Hey, by the way, I've got a gun."
I got a gun on
and then
me.
they pull it, and I'm gonna use it on you. They don't fucking do that shit. When a motorist tells you that they're armed, that's your first clue that you're not going to get shot.
Correct.
Because they're telling you, they're putting it out there. The reason that they're telling you this is so that you know you're not about to get shot. Hey, I want this to be a level playing field. I'm armed. I want you to know it for my safety and yours. People who shoot the police don't fucking do that. Okay. So Officer Yanez's first clue that Philando Castile wasn't dangerous was the fact that he told him he had a gun.
Gotcha.
That's reasonable. Okay. And remember, everything is based on a reasonableness standard. Graham versus Connor, case law, use of force, all of it's reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I do not know Officer Yanez, but I would suspect that Officer Yanez is probably not an overt racist. He probably doesn't to his core hate black people. The reason I think that is because I know the process that you go through to get hired to be a police officer,
Okay.
and it's pretty good. They do a pretty good job of weeding out those types of people.
Gotcha.
So based on that knowledge, I'm confident in saying he probably isn't an overt racist.
Okay.
That being said, I think his actions were absolute racism, and here's why. He was fearful. We are taught to fear black people.
Now, is that taught in the police
No,
force?
no.
Or
No,
that's
no.
just white society?
That's society.
Gotcha.
Society teaches. Just like you made a post on Facebook recently about North Korea and ISIS, and you're like, I don't fear those people.
I don't fucking fear them. I'm
But the
afraid
reason
of
you'd even
white
think to
people.
say that, the reason you'd even think to say that you don't fear ISIS or North Korea is because the media tries to get you to.
Yeah.
They're
They are
conditioning
not the
you
one,
to.
I was gonna say they are not the ones who have put my people in 400 years of slavery.
No.
They are not. They're not the ones who put us through civil rights movement.
Nope.
They didn't give us crack, and then put what was it when they put crack in the neighborhood? They cracked down on locking people up.
Mm-hmm.
We call it the Section 80.
Mm-hmm.
The 80s was crazy. That's why we like fuck Reagan.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So
Yep.
go on, Blue.
So-
I can go on rant.
No, you're right. So the fear that we've been conditioned to feel when it comes to black people. So he pulls this guy over. He sees blackface. He's already supposedly suspicious that this person was involved in a robbery because of his wide set nose.
Yeah.
That statement alone is pretty racist if you think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's kind of right off the bat. If that's all you got,
Right.
that's a little questionable.
Yeah.
If that dude had any fucking wherewithal, he wouldn't even have thought to say that because
Gotcha.
it's fucked up. But then he sees the black dude. He sees the dreads. The guy says, "I have a gun," and then the guy predictably reaches for where a license would typically be kept, and that is when the officer shot Philando Castile 7 times.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why? The officer would say that he thought that Philando was going for the gun, but that's not reasonable to think that. And I can say that definitively because I've been in his position and I've never shot somebody for that exact set of circumstances. So I can speak to this because I've been in that position. I've never done it.
Mm-hmm.
It is not reasonable in that instance for Philando Castile to have shot, or for Officer Yanez to have shot Philando Castile. It is not reasonable. And that is why he was brought up on charges, because it isn't. And the court even acknowledged that was fucked up. All right?
Mm-hmm.
The reason he did that, the only explanation is fear.
And the charges, hold on, let me bring it right back up. The charges that were on him were second-degree manslaughter, 2 counts of dangerous discharge of a firearm.
Yeah. So this whole thing is so fucked up. It's just so, in its entirety, it's so incredibly fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really frustrating is cops won't fucking say it.
Mm-hmm.
Cops won't say it because there's this culture that they back one another.
Yeah.
There's this culture that we support one another. We never talk bad about one another, but we need to, because when fucked up shit like this happens, it's never going to get resolved or fixed or remedied unless we fucking talk about it and call it what it is. This was fucked up. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the only explanation in my mind, having been a cop for 10 years and having been in his shoes in that exact set of circumstances, knowing all the facts that we know and watching the video, the only explanation for why he shot Philando Castile was fear. He saw a black dude with dreads who had a wide set nose reaching for what he believed to be a gun because Philando had just told him, "Hey, I've got a gun." He immediately reacts out of fear and fucking kills him.
Mm.
That's racism.
Mm-hmm.
That fear that he experienced in that, given all the facts that we know, it has to have been fear. And again, the reason that I feel confident saying that is because I've been in his shoes.
Now,
and I haven't reacted that way because I don't have that fear, because I'm reasonable.
How did that police officer get off on that case?
All right, so because of case law.
Okay.
So there's so many fucked up things about this. One of the just real briefly, anybody who's had any firearms training, there's a series of very specific rules on how to safely use and fire guns. One of the rules is be aware of your backdrop. Be aware of what is behind your target.
Okay.
You know what was behind Officer Yanez's target? A 4-year-old little girl.
Yeah.
Was his backdrop. He pulls a dude over for a broken taillight. The guy is completely calm and cooperative.
Yep.
So much so that he informs the officer, "Hey, I've got a firearm. There's a woman in the car. There's a 4-year-old girl in the back seat." Philando reaches for the license that he was just asked to provide, and Officer Yanez shoots him 7 times. The backdrop was a woman and a child. That is more fucked up than I can even begin to tell you. It is. There's so much wrong with this. I can't even begin to express it.
Gotcha.
Okay. Keep in mind, I've been in positions probably 7 to 8 times where I could have lawfully killed somebody, and I've never done it. Because
you never killed anybody on duty?
I've never fired my gun on duty.
Okay.
I've been in positions where I lawfully could have. I could have been in at least 4 shootings that I would have been cleared for. Fun little side note for you. And I didn't shoot because it wasn't the right decision, and I didn't have these other dynamics at play that I think Officer Yanez had at play. All right. So everything about this is fucked up. He shoots this dude for absolutely no reason whatsoever. The other interesting thing about the video is that the other cop who's on scene with him doesn't ever react. Doesn't have the fear that Officer Yanez has. If this were truly a violent, dangerous encounter, the other officer would have reacted accordingly. He didn't, which is further evidence that Officer Yanez was fearful and did what he did out of fear. and that fear is that fear has a racial basis to it.
Gotcha.
If that had been a white dude in a 3-piece suit,
Yes.
he would not have done that. I promise you.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a factor that led him to do something so unreasonable. And the only reasonable factor that I can think of is fear. And that fear comes from a society that teaches us to fear about black people, I think.
So when you say case law and the guy who shot Philando, in what ways did he describe the shooting to get off in that way?
The reason he got off is because of what I explained before with case law. So the facts as Officer Yanez relayed them are he understood, or he believed, based on the wide set nose, that this was potentially a suspect in a robbery. So that's a violent felony. Philando told the officer that there was a gun on his person, and he reached to where people typically would keep a gun. There's also case law that says if it's reasonable to assume a weapon is there, and somebody makes a furtive movement, that's the term, the lawful term, furtive movement, which means
so they can
gestures towards it.
They can say that shit and they all right. They're squeaky clean.
Well,
because
there's case law that says,
you said we have videos now and we can see the shit going on.
Yes. Okay, so that's another conversation. There's a lot to talk about case law, and a little theory that I've come up with that I hope to actually prove someday through my master's. I'm going to get a master's, I hope, and I hope to prove my theory regarding all this, and we'll go into that later.
Yeah.
So the reason case law and Graham versus Connor is why Officer Yanez was not found guilty. Because as I described, you cannot go forward in time and judge an officer's use of force from hindsight. You have to judge it from what the officer was dealing with and the facts at hand at the time that the incident occurred. So the officer says, I thought this was a suspect in a robbery. He told me there was a gun. He reached for the gun. There's also case law that says if it's reasonable to believe there's a gun in play, which in this case it was reasonable because he told him there was a gun. If somebody makes a furtive movement towards that gun, it's reasonable to think that they're going to shoot you. Now, I disagree with that emphatically in this case because it isn't reasonable to think that Philando is about to shoot Officer Yanez for a million reasons that we've discussed.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, case law exists that says that. So he got found not guilty because of case law, because case law exists that says you can't judge an officer from hindsight. You have to judge the incident from the facts known at the time. There's also case law that says if you make a furtive movement for a weapon, it's reasonable to think that you're about to get shot, so you can take action. He got off because of case law. He got off because of existing case law. Okay?
Gotcha.
That does not excuse it. That does not make it okay. It's completely, entirely fucked up, and for the reasons that I've just described. Officer Yanez acted out of fear, and he fucked up in a big, 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 big way. And here's what cops do, though. I think to their core, I think if you were to ask most cops secretly, one-on-one, where nobody else could hear it, they'd probably agree that that was a bad shooting, but they won't fucking say it.
They won't say
Cops won't apologize for that.
And
they won't admit it.
You know, when black people came out with the whole Black Lives Matter thing, and white people immediately came out and said, all lives matter. White lives matter. Blue lives matter. Black people are the ones that's getting killed on TV, and everybody can see it, and we're just simply saying, hey, guys, our lives matter.
The reason that
white people literally just, once again, smacked us in the face.
The reason that Black Lives Matter has to exist and that needs to be said is because historically they haven't mattered. Exactly. White lives have always mattered. Nobody fucking thinks that white lives... Society's set up in proving that white lives matter. It's the same reason why there's a gay pride day and not a straight pride day. You don't need a straight pride day because straight people don't suffer.
Right.
We can fucking marry whoever we want whenever we want.
Yeah.
You don't have to fight for jack shit.
Yeah.
So we don't need to have a straight pride day. Society's set up in our favor.
Gotcha.
Gay people need a gay pride day because society isn't set up in their favor. Black people, similarly, we have to say Black Lives Matter because if you look at the way society works, they don't seem to. There isn't evidence that society as a whole values Black lives because there's a whole bunch of evidence that says otherwise. So it needs to be said. No shit, all lives matter. You dumb motherfucker, dude. That drives me crazy.
Come on, Blue.
The reason it needs to be stated is because historically Black lives aren't respected,
Right.
and they haven't mattered, and so it needs to be said.
Right.
So the outrage over Philando Castile is warranted.
Yep.
It was a bad shooting. It was horrific. It was racist, and not because Officer Yanez is a racist, but because of the way society treats black people and the fear that it instills in people.
Mm-hmm.
The reason he got off is because of case law and because of the way that has been developed over the years. Now, here's my thesis that I hope to prove someday. Case law developed in a time where there weren't video cameras on every corner and in every pocket.
It's like the Constitution.
Yep. So, case law.
Wait, hold on. So yeah, we live in 2018,
mm-hmm.
and we living by what some white men wrote back in the 1700s.
Mm-hmm.
That shit makes no sense. People quote these amendments. People quote the Constitution. But yeah, everything else, we get updated technology. We get updated, just everything.
Mm-hmm.
Everything gets updated. But the Constitution still stays by some white men in the 1700s.
Slave owners, by the way.
Slave owners, by the way. I just wanted to point that out.
The
Go back to what you were
Constitution,
saying,
the
please.
Constitution was written by a bunch of white people with no women in a time when you could own other people. Is there a chance that it may need to be updated? Probably. Yeah, there's a good chance it may be a little antiquated at this
But
point.
you gotta go through so much shit to change it, so we ain't gonna probably never get it changed, and that's what fears me, man.
It's crazy.
So yeah, go. Just
So
go.
so case.
Sorry to cut you off.
Oh no, you're good, man. It's your show. So case law developed in a time where there weren't video cameras.
Mm-hmm.
So in most cases, especially in cases where lethal use of force was used, you're only hearing one side of the story because the person who got shot is typically dead. There's no cameras. There's no video recording of what occurred. And so the only voice you actually hear is the officers. And, officers...
Which is why the Black Panthers were developed.
Yeah.
The Nation of Islam was developed
Exactly.
because of things like that. Mm-hmm.
Officers are supposed to be trustworthy. We're supposed to not lie.
Yep.
We're supposed to be well-motivated. We're supposed to be ethical. We're supposed to be moral.
And that's our brotherhood, correct?
Well, it should. I wish our brotherhood was morals and ethics and those types of things. But what our brotherhood actually ends up being is protecting one another to a fault.
Mm-hmm.
When bad things happen, when police do bad things, good officers should be the first ones to step up and call it what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But there is this weird brotherhood that it's, when I took an oath to become an officer, I swore to protect and serve citizens, not other officers. My oath and my responsibility is to citizens, but there is this kind of unspoken loyalty that police officers just don't speak badly about one another.
Wow. Now, I told you in the last episode that you terrified me just by your appearance.
Yeah.
'Cause white people scare me. Now, I want to say this because it's important. But I went and I met you, but I met you at a showing about a bunch of atheists. Here I am. I'm a guy who believes in a higher power. And you don't believe in none of that shit.
Mm-hmm.
But I still had a couple beers with you. What does that say? People just need to talk, right?
Oh, yeah.
People just need to fucking talk. We are more human than anything.
Yeah.
And I think with this show, what we're doing, we're just showing people how two people can be different, but two people can have a conversation.
Yeah, and the second you do have a conversation with people who are different than you normalize that person and you humanize them, and you realize, because really at the end of the day, the truth is we're all way more similar than different. That's why white supremacy is so fucking stupid. Is because all humans share like 98% of their genes with chimps. So if humans are 98% similar to chimps, or whatever the percentage is, it's really high. It's close to 100%. If we're that similar to chimps, imagine how much more similar you and I are.
Yeah.
We're basically identical. We have very few things that actually make us different at the end of the day when it really matters. That's why white supremacy is so fucking dumb. You're not supreme. You're not better than anybody. You're exactly the fucking same. So let's do it. If the truth is we're all equal, so let's start treating each other that way.
I got friends who straight, gay, white, black, Muslim, atheist, of course. Stop being a homophobe. Stop saying you're not going to talk to this person because of their religion views. stop talking to this person because of whatever, and go experience people. Stop dismissing things and go experience people. So we're gonna wrap it up right there, guys. Just to let you know, we did have some technical difficulties during this show. So if it sounds a little choppy or something, just skip over that or ignore it. Be patient with us. We are two guys who actually just came together to have this show, and because we felt like the conversation that we have when we go out needed to be heard. And so we're still new to the podcast life. We are still working on getting it on iTunes and Blue. If you want to tell them again about the website where they're going to get these shirts, because these shirts fire.
Absolutely, man. So we're brought to you by Black Luster Clothing Company.
Support black business.
It's Facebook Black Luster Clothing Company, BLACKLUSTRE. Also online at blackluster.com.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just to say what Black just said, we had some problems on this episode. We recorded, lost about 20 minutes of it, and then
it was
had
some
to
good shit.
It was good shit.
We're going to keep it coming, man.
And we're not really sure what we lost.
Yeah.
What portion of it we didn't
we just
get to.
talking.
And then we tried to jump back in. So
yeah, we just tried to jump back in. But it's all good. We want to thank y'all for supporting us and continue to support us and be patient with us. Thank y'all.
Yep, take care.